Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. This is episode number 31. Today's guest is going to be another unbelievable conversation with a super cool person. A mutual friend hooked us up. We'll drop his name in a bit. I'll let you introduce yourself, name, and what you're up to.
So my name is Haley Daniels, and I am a Team Canada whitewater canoeist.
Awesome. And the reason you and I are talking together is a mutual friend, Kevin Morihira. I call him Hefe.
Shout out, Kevin.
Kevin was on the show. I think he was episode number 17. And right away, he said, you need to talk to Haley, which is why she's here. And she said yes, which is really cool. So the gist of the show is I like the guest to kind of go back as far as you want to go. We'll get into what you've just recently accomplished, obviously. But I like to take the guest back to whatever age where things started to click, like how you grew up, where you grew up, the influences, parents, school, athletics. So just go back to a point where you're like, yeah, things started to click when I was in grade 4.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to go way back. I think for me, I'm born and raised in Calgary, and we were always a really outdoorsy family. So getting out on canoe trips and hiking trips and skiing was my mom's number one passion. So
downhill, alpine?
Downhill skiing, yeah.
Okay.
She loves going to the resort and ripping up the groomers.
Yeah, awesome.
So we were always out there on the weekends, and I loved snowboarding when I was younger. I switched to the dark side, my dad said. Mm-hmm. And so we'd always go out and I would go snowboarding, and on the evenings and weekends I was out with my friends in the park at COP when it was called COP, now known as Winsport. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I was always a really, I wouldn't say athletic kid, but energetic kid. Like I just really, really loved getting out and moving, and really struggled in school because you had to sit and be in this structured environment. And I think something I realize now, but I didn't as a kid, is I love structure, but I like creating my own structure. So I actually really love drawing, and I hate coloring. Like if you give me a coloring book, I'm not enthused, but I love drawing because I can make my own lines and then color within my lines.
Interesting.
So that's kind of my life, is I create my own lines, but then I stay within them. So yeah, when I was younger, I didn't really like people making, particularly school, making the structure for me. So it was hard. And
what was hard about it? Like, were you like really bad at school? Or were you just like frustrated sitting there because you knew it just wasn't your thing?
I definitely have ADD, and I would say I have a form of dyslexia. I haven't been diagnosed with it, but I do not have things click right away. But I definitely need to talk through scenarios and like be very hands-on and visual. And I think in school, it just wasn't a great environment for me, and particularly math and sciences were really tricky. And now, actually, I'm studying for an aptitude test for Calgary Fire Department. I applied.
No way.
Yeah, so it's
cool.
Kind of a random sidebar thing. But
no, it's not random at all. And the reason I say that is because my whole family's it's been in the fire department.
Okay, so yeah, you can definitely give me some insights. So I applied to Calgary, and I got through the first stage, which is the aptitude test.
Yep.
And I'm studying right now, and it's you have to do long form math and mechanical advantage things and reading comprehension. And going through it now, it's all the stuff that I hated and struggled with in high school and junior high. But now I'm just realizing it's just patterns and tricks. And those are the patterns and tricks that I didn't get. And I think it's because I was talking to my friend beside me when I was actually supposed to be focusing on the teacher. I mean, the part I did love about school was my friends and the socialization and being able to like just have an adventure every day with my friends at school.
Like was recess like your favorite time of the day?
Yeah. Like all through elementary, I would play soccer, and I was like the only girl on the team. Yeah. And I loved soccer. I loved getting out, or we'd play like on the monkey bars or whatever. I broke my nose because I was trying to do some funky stuff. Yeah. Like one of many times that I broke my nose. But yeah, I think it was just, it was until now looking back, like I think it's more about dedicated focus, but having a goal in mind. And when I was younger, I didn't see why I needed to have good grades or why I needed to, like even when I was in high school, I was like, I'm just going to paddle and I'm going to go and snowboard and travel the world. Why do I need to get good grades now? I don't care. Like I'm not going to university. And once I got into Mount Royal was the first university experience for me.
Yep.
I loved it. I thrived, but it was because I was doing something that I actually liked.
Yep.
I was doing marketing and business, which is how I met Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a totally different experience for me. So
it's interesting when you can, I did something similar. I went to university like later in my life, and I was horrible at school, and I was horrible at university too. So it didn't work out, but I felt it's amazing when you find something, or like even the fire aptitude test or going back to university, when you actually know why you're there and you want to be there, it seems like things just work differently.
Absolutely. Well, and I think something that I've realized through my sporting career is if you do not know your why, and if I didn't know my why, there was no way I was doing it. I had to know why I was doing it, and it had to be very clear as glass.
And would you have to come up with the why, or would a coach have to give you the why?
I think a little bit of both. My coach, Michael Holroyd, he's no longer my coach anymore, but he was my coach for the last 15 years. And he formed who I am. And I would say most of my realizations and work ethic and discipline came from him and his training environment. So, I mean, it definitely like finding my why. You always have to do some digging, but I think it's this integral, we call it the IST team. So my integrated service team, and they always help me find that why as well.
Because if that why does it work better if it's a two-way conversation with the coach, like trying to figure out the why, or would you rather it just come from like one direction?
I think if I were to speak to my foundational values, like one of them is being connected, whether it's to the water or the people around me or the place I'm in. And so being able to talk to someone that I'm connected to and that I respect and care for, and I know they care for me, like that helps me trust what they're saying and what I'm saying. And also you get verification, like, you know, talking to someone else and they're asking you questions and they're listening, they're nodding. You're like, okay, I'm on the right track. I'm not crazy. So
totally.
Yeah.
I want to bring you back to, sorry, I love the tangent. So anyways, back to when you were kind of growing up, your parents were they just introducing you to as many activities as possible and just letting you kind of find your spot? Or was it like, did they have was it a seasonal push? Like just, hey, there's 10 things to do this season. We're just going to throw you into everything. And then you kind of figured out what you really love doing?
I think for our family, what was really important was spending time as a family, getting outside together.
Brothers, sisters?
Brother, I have a younger brother, and he's actually my best friend. We're very close. He followed me to Canmore. We just moved out there, and he just moved out there, and I was so stoked.
Awesome.
But we always had this foundational ability to work together and not really complain. And I think in terms of structure towards school or sports, it was never really like, my parents didn't sign me up for a bunch of things. They were just like, oh, this is going on. Do you want to do it? And I'd be like, yeah, or no, or it was never a push. And reflecting back, sometimes I wish my parents had pushed me to get better grades so I didn't have to upgrade or this, that, and the other. But also like, I wouldn't have been happy. I would have been miserable. So for me, it was just very natural. And getting into paddling, my dad's best friend at the time had a paddling camp in Pincher Creek. And I know, of all places, in southern Alberta. So
in the dam, like on the dam, they got a lake down there. What is it?
I think it was on the Castle River.
Okay.
Yeah, and Castle and St. Mary's.
But how random is that?
It wasn't random because this was my dad's really good friend growing up. I'd gone to Pincher Creek a bunch because they lived in Lumberg Falls.
Okay.
And so I was like, yeah, I'm just going to Chuck's camp. So I went to Chuck's camp and
how old are you?
I was 13.
Okay.
And I went with one of my really good friends who lived in Valley Ridge with me at the time. And she was not very athletic, but I was stoked to go with her. So we went out and I loved it. And one of the guys that I met there is one of my best friends still, and he's into paddling as well. And they said to us after, they were like, oh, nationals are at the Kananaskis, you should come. And so I was like, okay, like, sure. Like, I don't know what that entails. And so my parents kind of just kept on taking me to these training sessions and I kept liking them. And that's how it just naturally progressed. I wouldn't say it was a, like I today the Team Canada commercial for the Beijing Olympics came out, and it was like, you have these little kids that are like, I want to be an Olympian when they're 4 years old or 5 years old. And to me, like, it was never this dream, never this pipe dream that I wanted to work towards always. Definitely in the later half of my life. But when I was younger, I was just like so present because I was so aware and excited about life. And I think that's what got me into sport.
And they were still, they take you to these different camps, but they'd also be taking you to do different activities too, whether it's skiing or like biking or whatever. So it was just this like constant activity.
Yeah, like cross-country skiing and downhill skiing. And I didn't get into biking until about 3 years ago. We were never really a bike family, but lots of hiking and canoe trips in the summer. And we've always had golden retrievers growing up. My dad actually did avalanche rescue with dogs. So my brother and I often would be like in a snow cave and my dad would buy us Archie comics, and we would read these Archie comics. And dogs would come find us, and crazy. It's definitely a unique upbringing, but I feel super grateful because I feel like my risk tolerance is very different because of being outdoors all the time, and also just my appreciation for green spaces and open spaces is really important to me.
And having that the higher risk tolerance, can you push yourself a little bit further? Do you find that you're just willing to go just more like, I can do this? Or
definitely. I think just having, like, my parents were never really scared of me pushing the limits with snowboarding or with paddling. I think my parents definitely put me into slalom paddling versus creeking. So creeking is when you go off a waterfall and you have really steep creeks, class 5 water. Slalom is where you're on like a class 2-3 river, sometimes 4 with gates, and you're just leaving laps on it. And I definitely was gravitating towards creeking because I was like, oh, that's cool. I want to go off big waterfalls.
Yeah, because when you like go upside down, you're like trying to, not banging your head off.
But I did it when I was younger, and I think that allowed me to, just assess my risk now as an adult. And like, I would just eat dirt. I would scrape my knees. Like I had cuts and bruises all over my hands and legs and arms all growing up, and it just didn't faze me. Like that was just me.
Just another night out.
Yeah. So now when I fall or when I'm assessing something, like I definitely look at it as if I'm going to read a river, and then know that I'll be okay if it's a little fall.
Yep. How do you if you started at 13, what age did it start like becoming a little more consuming?
I made the goal to make the junior national team. And so that was, I believe I was around 15 or 16. And I started getting involved in the training program here in Calgary. And there was quite a few people that were training here at that time. So that made it really easy because I had friends to go train with. And my first training camp was in Chilliwack, BC. And it was like rainy and miserable, but super fun at the same time. I clearly remember driving to the river and listening to like Jane Cook, like his comedy stuff, and
like his offsides,
and I clearly remember like quoting it on the river, and I was like, man, paddling's so fun. I can just hang out with my friends and quote Jane Cook, and it was such a vivid memory. But then my first international training camp was in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And do you have to, when you decide to get into these training camps, do you have to get invited, or you just sign up? Like, how does
it's like a little bit of both. So because our sport is smaller, you can kind of just show up and pay a fee. There's not really any invitational things, but to go to Worlds or World Cups, you have to have like a standard for that. So first you have to go to national team trials and make the team. And I never made the junior team. I was reserve for the junior team. So that year I actually went to Europe with my coach, Mike, and we just did a bandit tour. That's what he called it.
So you two just kind of...
No, well, we had a couple other athletes. There was 6 of us. We just went around Europe to the smaller races there and kind of saw what the slalom scene was in Europe. And my eyes were opened. I was like, whoa, like this is what paddling is. And
what were those moments that caught your attention?
Well, that I was so behind.
so you thought, in your bubble, you were probably capable and
for sure. I was like, oh, I'm good. I'm really good at the sport here in Alberta, right? And then I went to Europe and I was like, whoa, like
Way different.
way different. These kids are as good as I was at 15 or I think I was 17, and they were like 10 or 12, and they were just crushing it.
And what makes them good? What's the in your sport? What's the move or the movement, or what is it that you're just like, oh God, these kids are good? Is it power, speed, agility? Like
it's being agile. Like it's kind of like dancing
throwing
on the
your
water.
boat around?
No, it's very subtle with your edges and just precise strokes, like stroke timing, and then like edging properly. And particularly, they have access to facilities, so they have artificial whitewater courses or big clubs that are running all year, and we just don't have that, right? It's winter most of the year here. So I remember going to the Junior Worlds, and the gal that I was competing with the spot with, she actually hurt her shoulder, and I was sitting there like, put me in, coach, like I can go, and they didn't put me in, and I was so frustrated.
What was the decision?
The decision was they just she had left it too late, and so it was the day of. She decided that she didn't want to paddle because of her shoulder, and she had been feeling it all week, and we kept on being like, Haley's here, she can paddle, and it was in Czech Republic, and I was so angry, and so that made me train really hard that year and want to make the senior team. And so there was actually this pivotal moment around then, because I was doing kayak, so that's where you're sitting. You have a double blade, and the boats are very similar.
Kayak down through gates?
Yeah, so there's a couple different categories. So there's kayak and there's canoe. So kayak, you're sitting, you have a double blade. And there's canoe, where you're kneeling and you have a single blade. And I had, at this point, I hadn't made the senior team for kayak yet. It was very hard. And there was this opportunity for women's canoe that was getting added to the World Championships and the World Cups. And I was like, okay, like maybe I'll try this. So I did both of them at the same time. I was really bad at canoe because I was scared all the time.
Because it felt like
super unstable. You're kneeling, so you're higher in the water. So your center of gravity is higher, and you only have one blade. So it's like, holy cow, like you're doing one stroke and then an offside, and then this thing switching became popular. So where you switch sides while you're going down the river. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my dad being like, Dad, I really like canoeing. Like, I think that there's an opportunity for me to actually go somewhere with this. And I'd never really thought a lot of myself, to be honest, when I was younger. I never thought I would be great at anything or...
Were you just doing it because you were passionate about it, but also like you're like good?
Yeah, I think paddling was the one area in my life, and it still is, that I feel free and myself and accomplished, I guess. Maybe that's not the right word, but
like purposeful? Or like
purposeful. Yeah, I had purpose, and I felt like I didn't have that in anything else. And so when canoeing became onto the circuit, I was like, okay, like I think I should switch.
How long ago was this?
And I was about 17 or 18. I think I was 18.
Okay.
No, I was 16, because I went to the National Sports School for my last year of high school, and I was doing canoe at that time.
So it's been around for a little bit now.
Yeah,
still
for
new.
sure.
It's still new, right?
Yeah, for sure. And so, but when I switched, I got so much better. I made the senior team, and I went to all the training camps, and like I was away all the time. And I got my first medal at an international competition, which was like a silver medal at the Pan Am Championships in Brazil. Cool. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
What does that feel like? What does that feel like to accomplish something at that scale, like an international competition? What does that feel like? It
was actually, so that race in particular was really, really a lot of emotions and really hard, because it was the Olympic trials for my team. So we can get into this now, but dive into it.
Wherever you want to go.
So women's canoeing was my passion and is my passion, but it became so much bigger than just me. So when they said that they were adding it to the World Championships and the World Cups, and when I say they, it was the International Olympic Committee and the International Canoe Federation, we were like, okay, so that means that there's going to be an Olympic berth, and we'll probably be in London. So
what year was London, sir?
2012.
Okay.
Yeah, and so they kept on dragging their feet in the sand, and we didn't have an Olympic berth until Tokyo 2020, after so much advocacy, so many letters, so much turmoil, and almost a class action suit getting launched. Like it was full on.
Crazy.
And so when I was at this competition in Brazil, it was the Pan Am Championships, and there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through to get to the Olympics. So not every country gets to go. Only 17 nations get to go, and then one person per country, per category gets to go.
Yep.
So you qualify your spots either at World Championships or at the Pan Am or your continental qualifiers. And so at that time, women's canoeing wasn't in, so I was just a spectator, but I was not a spectator to the Olympic trials, but I was still competing. And one of my really good friends and mentors and older gals were competing for an Olympic spot with Brazil. And it was hard. Same with the men's C2. They were also competing for a spot, and men's kayak. And so I was both elated that I had done well, but disappointed because no one made an Olympic spot except for the men's kayak that race. So there was 2 spots that were lost to the Brazilians and the US. So I didn't really want to celebrate. I didn't really want to feel that emotion because I felt so much more loss for my teammates who lost their Olympic opportunity at that point.
Yep. So you're just like, it's a high, like that's a big accomplishment. Probably the peak of it was the peak, I'm guessing.
At that moment, yeah, it was definitely the peak.
You can't enjoy it.
Yeah, that's definitely how I felt. And so I went home and I was still hungry, and so I trained hard. And
you said it a couple of times now. Do you react when you get pushed into a corner? Like you said it 2 different ways. Once you were mad and you kind of came out swinging.
Yeah.
This, you come out of that event and you're kind of pissed off or not, something's not there, and you come out swinging again, like you train harder. Is this a thing?
Yeah, definitely. I don't do well with getting beat down. I would say I'm really bad at wallowing, my sports psych would say. Just like, Haley, you need to wallow more.
That's a good word.
No, it's because wallowing helps you process and understand, where I am like, okay, this didn't go well, so let's go back to the drawing board, like work my ass off here, like go here. So yeah, for sure. I think that being put in a corner, I mean, I think back to like when I'm hanging out with my guy friends in high school and they would just poke me, like literally poke me, and I would react. I would always react. But I remember my mom saying, like, when you react, they're going to continue to poke you.
Unless you like react to a point they're like, oh God.
Yeah, and then she's crazy, right? So I like didn't want to be the crazy lady, but I also didn't want to be like,
for sure.
Like exactly. So I would say I am never one to back down from a fight.
Yep.
I do not thrive with controversy, but I do believe in injustice, and I do believe in equality.
Yep.
And that's been my foundation since the beginning.
Where does that come from? Like to be able to put, the way you said that was very interesting because it's very thoughtful and it makes a lot of sense. Did it take you time to reflect on how you make your decisions to come up with that direction?
A lot of it came from, that specific thing came from women's canoeing not being an Olympic sport and being in a male-dominated industry where women were just not respected. And like I've firsthand seen a lot of disrespect on the water, off the water, backhanded comments, things like that. So it came from growing up in that. But I think my mom was just she is a really strong woman. She's still around. And my dad is also a really strong person. And I think it just always came down to like, do what's right, not do what everyone else is doing. That being said, I'm a people pleaser.
There's lots going on.
Absolutely. I like struggle making decisions for myself because I worry about what other people are going to think or how they'll feel. So it's my strength and my weakness.
Totally. Which is a good one to have. It's like we talked off camera too. It's the reason why you get put in these situations over and over. You're like,
absolutely.
okay.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Sure.
So after the Pan Am Games, you kind of come out swinging again. You have a new, because what year was the Pan Am Games?
That was Pan Am Championships, and that was Brazil 2011.
So 2011, so you're not in the Olympics for 2012.
No, and then Rio, we really thought that we were going to be in the Olympics.
So were you training, hoping that it was actually going to come?
Full on, yeah. And I think the hard part about that was that I was training full time, and I was on the national team. I was going to all the same training camps as my teammates, but I didn't have access to any funding. So
Why?
Because we weren't Olympic.
Right.
So Sport Canada only funds Olympic sports.
Yep.
So
you're traveling around like the World Cup circuit?
So I'm paying like $50,000-$60,000 a year as a
you're
young
done.
adult,
Yeah.
and like going into debt, like
Yeah.
trying to do fundraisers, trying to hustle sponsors, and yeah, like it is. Sometimes I would have to say no to training camps because I couldn't afford it.
How do you, like, that's a massive amount of money as a young person.
Oh yeah.
With, without that Olympic goal there, because it's not solidified yet. Is it just, what is it? Like, what kept you going down that path? Training, traveling, competing.
It was a non-traditional job that I think now looking back, like it
was a job.
It was a job
that you paid for.
That I paid for. Yeah, I remember my coach Mike saying, because at that time I was like working 2 part-time jobs.
You were?
Oh yeah, I
What
was
were you doing?
working. My first job was at Atmosphere.
Oh yeah, like down by Mac here?
Yeah, right across from Mac.
Okay.
So I started working there when I was 14. I worked there for 4 years.
Yeah,
then I worked at COP at the gym.
Okay.
And then I worked for the Alberta government as a public speaker. That was an awesome job.
what kind of speaking, like public?
I did post-secondary motivational speaking. So I went to high schools and I would use personal anecdotes to share why kids should pursue post-secondary. And it was so awesome.
Was that, what did that feel like when you got to do that? Because if school, and this, I don't know, so I might be talking out of my ass here, but if school is like not ideal for you, and then you get asked to go back to speak to these students.
Well, that's exactly it. So I had the ability to go back to high school and tell all of these kids, look, I sucked. I really sucked in high school. Like I got 50s, maybe 60s. I never thought I would go to university and I thrived in university. I never thought I would be anybody and I'm working towards the Olympics. This was before I'd gone to Tokyo, but I think it's just like,
super cool.
Yeah, I on the way here, I was listening to Will Smith's book, which is amazing.
Is it?
It is totally worth listening
What's it
to. Will.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's he reads it. He it's almost like you're listening to a podcast. Like he recites stuff from like Fresh Prince and like everything. It's so good. But he talked about how he never really made it his goal to be like this big time hip hop artist or actor, and I totally related with that. And he said, what I did every day is I showed up and I just focus on the task at hand. And I think for me, like I always showed up and I focused on the task at hand. And that's really like, sometimes I think about like why or how I got to the Olympics and I'm like, almost think it's luck. Like, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I worked hard, but not as hard as I could have worked. But I showed up every day and I showed up when no one was looking. And I think that's really important.
Yep.
So, yeah.
What did you love about speaking? Like you came alive when you said that. You're like, I loved it.
I do love public speaking. It's I think a lot of people are afraid of it. But
do you like Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Do you like to? What's your shtick? Do you like to have a two-way conversation? Or do you like to go up there with a plan and you just kind of deliver your message?
I definitely have like some framework
Yep.
when I enter a presentation, but for the most part, I like to freestyle it based on how the gauge in the audience and see what they react to.
Yep.
When I was with Learning Clicks with the Alberta government, I had like a PowerPoint presentation.
Yep.
But yeah, I think it's that connection again, right? Like it comes back to like connecting with an audience and like really just being able to share my stories and my triumph and my adversity with these kids and let them know that they can climb out of whatever hole they're in if they're in a hole and do it.
What's the was there ever like a moment that you're just like a particular kid just like latched onto you or said something or followed you or interacted with you, emailed you? Was there anything that was like a moment you're like, There was a lot of different like follow-up emails. Awesome. It's got to feel special.
It's just like it's the best feeling ever knowing that your adversity is going to give someone else inspiration.
Yeah.
And
could you imagine if you had that growing up?
For sure.
Just to put you at ease knowing that, if you're struggling in school but you're accomplishing other things, it's like it's okay. Like everyone's on a different path, so it's not a
Absolutely. Well, and I think like I always thought I was dumb because you know,
you're saying things that I like.
Yeah, like I always thought that I just wasn't smart, and I'm actually like now realizing, like, humble brag, but like I am quite smart. I am very smart. I just wasn't taught the right way, and I think that's.
You might not have been interested either.
Well, for sure, and I think that that's like what's broken with our educational system. Like, I don't know. Like, I think if I have our kids, like, I kind of want to just like buy a sailboat and teach them on a sailboat sailing across the world, because like they're gonna learn so much more from that.
Yep.
Like, I think about like why I got into business and marketing, and it had nothing to do with school. It had everything to do with being a broke athlete. Like, my opportunity came from my adversity. So for me, like it just was like it clicked.
Yep.
That I have a knack for marketing.
Yep.
Like, I don't know, like influencing people and storytelling and things like that.
How do you explain that? Like the word I think about is the hustle, but it's more like an internal drive to understand like what to do and how to do it. Hustle is kind of a word that gets overused, but
yeah, well, it's definitely been a hustle. I wouldn't discount that word, but I think that my journey through it has really just been, I see something that isn't doing well, and then I have like 1,000 ideas of how to make it better.
Cool.
And so it's like this development and improvement, and it gets me so excited. And now, being successful in the sponsorship and marketing space as an athlete, I have a ton of athletes that I've coached since then, and I love that.
Explain what you've done. Like when you say success, I'd love to just.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's walk it through. So my first ever fundraiser-ish thing was like a wine and cheese thing. I had a couple things donated, made like $2,000, was on a high from that.
And this is you. You coming up. This was me. You coming up with an event. You putting together.
I was actually going to come to this earlier, so it's good we came back to it. So I had these jobs. I had part-time jobs. I was doing all these things, and my coach said to me, "Haley, why don't you just treat sponsorship like a job? Like, you're making what, $12 an hour? Like, if you get a sponsor, it's $1,000 an hour that you just worked on that hour, or whatever." And I was like, it just changed my way of looking at things. And same with scholarships. I never really applied to scholarships or grants, and then I was like, okay, spend two hours on this grant. And you get it. It's $2,000 you just got for 2 hours of work,
versus
right?
24 you would have made it retail.
Yeah, exactly. So I started really treating it like a job. So I researched all the athletes that were out there that had websites, and I literally studied these websites. Cool. And I was like, what makes it good? What makes it bad? And then I made my own website. I paid someone to do it. And I paid someone to make a promotional video for me. Cool. And then I started getting really serious about social media. And that's when attracted some of my first sponsors. My first sponsor was Manitoba Hemp Hearts.
And how long ago was this?
I think I was like 19. So like 20. Oh my God. Years and ages.
Yeah, it just all blurs.
Yeah, it all blurs. But I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And then I came up with, so then I was in business school at Mount Royal. Yep. And I think one of my strengths is my network. Like, I just love networking and meeting people and again, connecting, right? And so I was in business school, and I joined this thing called the Marketing Club, and it was the Marketing Society of MRU. Okay. And I was like, I'm going to take this as an opportunity to get to know as many rich people as I know, so I can ask them as many questions as possible, how they got there, how I can be better. And so I was having coffee dates with these like really not dates, coffee meetings with these people that were influential in Calgary. And I was having like maybe like 5 or 6 a week. Cool. And I was getting in the door through the Marketing Society. And I was asking them, I was like, can I pick your brain? And then I would just ask them a million questions. Like, okay, what, I have $90,000 that I need to make. How can I do it? And Kevin was one of them, actually. I sat down with him and I was like, okay, I've got this. And they would be like,
that must have been a long conversation.
Oh, there's tons of things there. But I think the thing, I would always just take tidbits out of it, and then I would just keep forming it. It was like Play-Doh. And so I made a sponsorship package, and I made,
and there's no blueprint for this, right?
There's absolutely no blueprint. And even though there's like the blueprint, it's not what sponsors want. Yeah. It's not what makes a successful fundraiser. So I kept on just rolling with it. And so I got one of my first sponsors, big sponsors, was Harmony Lake Community. So every day I was driving to the Kananaskis, and I was seeing these colorful paddles on the highway, and I was like, who are these people and how do I not know them?
Just on the way out of town?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so one of my friends who I'd met through the marketing society was working at Qualico, and he was like, oh yeah, that's like a community owned by Qualico. It's owned by another subsidiary called Bordeaux. And I was like, oh, can you introduce me? So I got to sit down in the room with the CEO and the marketing guy, and I went in there and I just was like, this is why you should sponsor me.
And just pitch your story.
And I just pitched it, and it was like nerve-wracking. And I was like, I want $15,000. And they were like, okay. And they said yes. And I was like, this is my first yes, right? So I was just like, I wanted to jump up and down. Keep it together, Haley. Okay. I just got paid $15,000 right now, right? So I was so stoked.
When you got out of that office, who's the first call?
My dad.
Awesome.
And then my mom, and then my brother.
Perfect.
Yeah. I think actually my mom and dad were together when I called them. But yeah, it was just this crazy thing, and I was so stoked. And
what were you selling then? What, like, so?
Yeah.
So the Olympics wasn't a thing yet. Like you weren't.
So I made myself a brand. So if we take a step back again,
this is all brilliant.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Because this is exactly what I'm up to, and you figured it out way before I did.
But I didn't know I'd figured it out. That's what was funny, right?
That's the best part.
But I think I kept on looking at athletes that were doing it well, or brands that I liked, and I was like, how can I be that? How can I? And I started realizing that I needed a product that I needed to sell, because sponsorship is just not people giving you money. Like you need to have an exchange. So I actually sat down with someone who was very influential, and I've said thank you to him many times. And his name is Ernest Barbaric. You should definitely have him on the podcast. Okay. He's a very interesting person. And I sat down with him at Higher Ground in Kensington, and he pulled out this piece of paper, and he was like, okay, Haley. He wrote my name down, and I was like, okay. And he's like, okay, what are you about? Like, what do you do? And I was like, well, I like sports. He's like, sports. Like, he's like, paddler. Okay. And then he's like, what makes you unique in your scene? Like, and I was like, well, like, gender equality. Like, we are not in the Olympics, and I've been one of the people globally fighting for this. And he was like, okay, so gender equality. Then he's like, you eat a plant-based diet, so you're vegan. And he put all these things here, and then I was like, oh, so then I can just start speaking to those things. So I want to create content on social media, when I want to do anything on my website, when I want to partner with a brand, it's so much easier because I have my pillars. And that changed everything for me, because then I had a list of, okay, it's changed a little bit because environment has come into my specter as well, but like environment, I have a list of environmental companies I want to work with. Plant-based diet, a list of companies. Then you have gender equality, a list of women CEOs. And then you just keep on going from there, and you keep on contacting them. And so I would set aside like 5 hours a day, or 5 hours a week. I'm training 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. Yeah. And then I'm working and going to school and all the other things. But I would set that time aside, and I would just cold call. I would send emails. And
unbelievable.
I actually started cold calling marketing companies to see if they would help me. And I had one that was amazing. Their names are Heather McRae and Stephen Carter. And Stephen Carter, actually, they said, yes, we'll talk to you. They gave me all this advice. And he's actually the campaign manager for Nenshi. Cool. So it ended up working out. And Heather just ran for council. Unfortunately, she didn't make it. But anyways, this all to say is that when I got a no, I would just go to another person. Yep. When I got a no, I would just go to another person. Yep. And it was just like those thousands of no's brought me to the right yeses. And working with Harmony, I'm still working with them, and they're an amazing company. And it brought me to work with Subaru and Mech and so many crazy brands. At RBC, like, I have so many amazing sponsors that I'm like so grateful for, but it just took sitting down and working with that. But then the other aspect of it, just if I dive into that really quick,
there's no quick
was fundraising. Yeah. So there was getting sponsors was really important for visibility and for.
Does it take the pressure off of that piece of your life, knowing that you can train the extra 2 hours, 3 hours a week, for sure, knowing that you have the finance to like cover all your bills?
Huge.
That's the kicker.
But every year it was like you'd have to renew the contract, so it was always a little scary that right before, like, are they going to sign with me again?
and when you're thinking that, were you thinking that it's that they were going to look at you based on your performance, or do you think they're going to look at you as far as how you're building your brand? What was the stress coming from?
I think my branding was never based on my performances. Like I won a bronze medal at the Pan Am Games in Toronto.
By the way.
Thank you. Yeah.
Brilliant.
I never wanted to put that pressure
Yep.
on myself when I was racing. So I never put performance bonuses, or I wanted to know that my sponsors and partners would be behind me regardless of my results. Yeah, they were in it for me and what I stood for versus me and what I perform at. So it's very different for different athletes.
I know, but this is the way you're thinking is the right way.
Well,
there's no debate.
It's different for everyone.
But like, I would, quickly, because I want to get back into it.
No, it's all good.
School, I was horrible at school. Dropped out of Mount Royal 3 times. I was in marketing, business, took all these things that I should have like been interested in, hated it. And the reason I hated it was because it was just, they weren't, the lessons they were trying to educate me with, they wouldn't connect.
Yeah.
Nobody talked like that, like how the brand over everything. And
well, they don't teach you this in school. They teach you to do SWOT analysis and pestles, and even a prospecting pipeline is not a thing that they talk about, and that's the most important thing in sponsorships. And like sponsorships is a niche as well, right? Like it actually frustrated me being in marketing at Mount Royal because I knew so much more. I didn't know more than the teachers. I'm not saying they were very educated and smart people, but I knew more than the project I was doing that I was paying to get to be a marketer.
Yep. You're right. Everyone does it differently, but the people that do it right do it this way. When you
But it was the struggle getting through it. Like the thing,
sure.
I think the thing that is like you have to find to get it to the right things, you have to have so much hardship.
Yep.
And that I think is what I didn't realize when I was younger, but I kept on showing up again, right? And I think if I can give any advice to like any of the younger generation out there, like especially this generation who is entitled, like you need to work. You need to like you don't have to show up to a job, but you need to have something that you work at and understand what, like if you lose it, what does that mean? Right? So
and what's amazing, and the word that, as you were talking about this, and I was just like, oh my gosh, she's saying like all these things I think about, and the word that I've been trying to think about lately is alignment. And things start happening when your world's aligned, and that's like the people you surround yourself with or the direction you're going. When it's all aligned, really cool things happen.
A mentor of mine actually talks a lot about quantum entanglement. It's Einstein's theory of quantum entanglement. So yeah, if you want to get deep dive, but it's basically we are all made up of protons and ions, and we just vibrate at different frequencies. And so when you are vibrating at your highest frequency, you actually attract people and the things in your life that you want to have happen. And there's full science behind it. It's not like, oh, like
the stars are aligned.
The stars are aligned, and like I'm a Sagittarius, and like it's none of that. It's like Einstein like has like written books about quantum entanglement. So if you follow your passion and the thing you are good at, and the thing that really friggin' makes your protons and ions vibrate, you will have things come to you and literally fall in your lap.
It's amazing. Here we are. I thought it's so interesting the way this conversation goes, right? When Kevin suggested you get on the show, I was like, yeah, great. Like a high performing athlete, I'd love to just hear the story. And then, you sit down and here we are talking about this stuff, which is also what I love talking about, which I never get to talk about. So
well, there you go.
It's super cool how it all aligns, because it's just, what, when you say it's not like the full moon and the stars, like I always say the world's just rolling the right way. And it's
for sure.
And for me, it's that alignment piece. I can't even say the word you used, and I couldn't spell it, so I won't use it.
Quantum entanglement.
Thank you. I want to, and this is me just being selfish, I'd love to hear the story and the moment when 2021 happened. Like what year this kind of all started, when it got approved to be in the Olympics.
So that was in 2018.
So you're on the World Cup circuit for...
World Cup circuit. I've been doing this for 15 years now. So I'm 31. And...
You've been on the World Cup for 15 years?
Yeah. And most of it I wasn't getting paid. So there's a thing called carding. Yep. And so I only was carded maybe the last 4 years of my career.
And the sponsorship, all that. How long has that play been out there?
The entire time.
Awesome.
Yeah, and the fundraisers are the thing that were the most lucrative.
What was the best one? Because I know you touched on it and then I
Yeah,
yanked you away. Sorry.
I had two. No, it's okay. One was that I came out with a vegan cookbook and I called it The Canoeist Kitchen.
No way.
And I taught vegan cooking classes in Canmore, and then those were awesome. And they always sold out, but they didn't actually. They only made about like $6,000 or $3,000 to $4,000 a pop. So they weren't for my $90,000 budget. It was, it was I had to do a lot of cooking classes, and it was a lot of work because I had to get all the ingredients sponsored and then bring them out. And so I was like, oh, what if I like auction off a date or something? Like
with you?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I was like, you know, people do this. Like I can auction off a date or like a date with an athlete for a day, you know?
Yep.
And we'll like get like sponsored clothes and all this stuff or restaurants and whatever. And I was like, maybe this will work. And so I actually formed an advisory committee. This is another thing that so I Heather and Steven, they were like, who do you answer to when you're doing sponsorships? I was like, me. And they were like, you need a team. So and they're like, primarily you need a team so that when you have an event, they can invite their network. So I literally reached out to 10 people that I had met through mostly the marketing society or random things. I didn't really know them that well. And I said, will you be on my advisory committee? And they all said yes. They were honored.
Do you know why they said yes? You figured it out?
I think just no. I think just if I were to be asked to be on an advisory committee of a young aspiring athlete, of course I would say yes, because I know that they're willing to work hard.
But it's also like, it's you, right?
I think that the relationship had been built for sure.
It's the energy that comes out of you. It's just.
Well, thank you.
I think it's
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense from the outside, not knowing anything.
Yeah, but so I had this advisory committee, and they were amazing people, and I was like, oh, like let's take down the paddles from Harmony and we'll auction those off. And actually, I didn't think of that. One of my mentors in the advisory committee did. His name is David Legg. He's also amazing. You should talk to him. He was the president of the Paralympic Committee and is a professor at Mount Royal.
Cool.
And so he was like, let's do that. And I was like, no, you know what? We should get artists to paint paddles and then we auction those off for money. So yeah, so I was sponsored by MEC at the time and they donated like 50 paddles and they were little kids paddles.
Wooden ones? Like, yeah, cool.
Yeah, and then I literally found 50 artists on Instagram.
Searching a hashtag?
So, like searching Calgary art or like like it just unfolded. Like I just.
You laugh at that, but it's such a thing that nobody gets. Like it's.
For sure.
Again,
that's how it's connected, right?
And what you're up to is like your marketing brain is playing at a way different level. And this hack, you just hacked the system to find 50 artists, which is
for sure. And I put a call out on Facebook, and I was like, I had a bunch of friends who were like closet artists that were amazing. Those are actually some of the best paddles. They weren't even professional artists, and they were stunning. And then I reached out to a friend. And they said they would help me. And then we did it the first one was at a rowing club, and it was owned by an Olympic gold medalist, Bruce, I can't remember, Robertson. Yep. And and then I was like, this is kind of a cool event. I should pitch the media. So I pitched the media, and freaking every news source wanted to do it. So the week before I was driving from CTV to CBC to Global, like all in the same, like.
And super comfortable.
Yeah, totally. You're just like, showing up and doing it because it was just I was talking about my event and
what you love.
Yeah, exactly. So it just tenfolded, and I just got introduced to so many people, and I had people contacting me through that. And then we had it 4 years in a row. We actually did it online the last year with the pandemic, and each one raised close to $30,000. It was huge, and it was just I think for me like the best part. The ones that were my favorite were called Cold Garden. And I just went there and I was like, hey, can I talk to the owner? And he was like, 100%, we'll donate a night, like free beer for everyone. Awesome. And people showed up and we hung the paddles up from the ceiling. It looked so cool. And it was an opportunity for me to thank everyone that had helped me to get to there. And I remember the last in-person event that we had, I had just flown back from Tokyo from the Olympic test event. I was literally home for 6 days for this event. And then I was flying back to Tokyo for a training camp. And I was there in this room, and I felt chills, and I was just so grateful that I had all these amazing people who believed in me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had this other feeling of, holy shit, what if I don't make it to the Olympics and all these people believe in me? And it really, really it was always real, but it really became real that it's not just for me, it's for so many other people.
Crazy. That would be an interesting internal debate.
For sure.
Just to like that, all of a sudden when that realization kicks in, that kind of like.
So then fast forward, I guess we can get into like so we become an Olympic sport. It's finally a thing.
What year?
I get funding. I think it's 2018.
Okay. So after, do they announce that after the 2016 games?
2016 games,
so 2 years
the year
later.
after. Yeah, 2 years later. And so we still, I think it was, it must have been 2017.
So the window's kind of tight.
It was super tight.
It's not the full 4.
Yeah. It was right before the quad. And we were like, finally, so I could qualify for karting. And it just became a lot more tangible. And like this pipe dream, this dream that I didn't even know would be possible, that I'd been chasing for so long, was actually going to play out.
And how much energy were you allocating to getting that, to achieving that, for the games, for that sport to get into the games? Was it like all consuming? Was it just always on your brain on a weekly basis?
For sure. I think I mean, a big part of my branding was gender equality. So I actually think I took advantage of it a little bit, but I'm fully aware of that it was astounding to people. But I think also not advantage of it. I think it was important for me, for the people of the world, to understand that there was still gender inequality in sport. And it's still happening, and we still need to address it. And so that's where I just kept going with that. And yeah, we fought. Like it was pretty cool to be working with like girls from across the world in all different countries, and we would have like conference calls and meetings talking about how we needed to put pressure here, or put pressure here, or like do this, and it finally paid off. But it was just work. It was
So what happens when it finally gets in? Then what? Is like sigh of relief, and you're like, do you mellow out for a second, or then you charge?
Yeah,
now it's time to go.
For sure. Like, I mean, it's in, okay, like it's on, right?
Like, I got to qualify for this thing.
Exactly. So then we got told where our Olympic qualifiers were going to be. So the first one, so there was 3 different races that we were going to have. So the first one was going to be in Seo, Spain, which is on the border of Andorra and France. And it's at the World Championships there. The second one is in Australia, Penrith, Australia, which is in the Blue Mountains. And the third one was going to be in Brazil, in Rio, Brazil. And that was the Pan Ams. And so I was competing with one other gal for the spot, and she's about 7 years younger than I am. So it was a really different struggle. And, we were at the Tokyo test event, and I remember sitting on the conveyor belt. So in our sport, you go down the river on an artificial course, and then you paddle to the bottom of this like conveyor belt, which is essentially an escalator that you sit on with your boat, and it just takes you to the top, and you go do it again. You just keep doing laps. So I was sitting on the conveyor belt with Lois, and we were talking about gender equality and how it was awesome that it's finally in the Olympics. And I can't remember how we got to that conversation, but she said to me, Haley, I've never really noticed like there's been any struggle. Like no one's ever treated me differently. No one has, I've always had the opportunity. I've always had funding opportunities, like everything that I'd struggled. And I was like, I just got chills. And I just remember being like, this is why we did it. This is why we fought. So she can have these opportunities, right? And ironically, now I'm fighting with her for the Olympic spot, but it was because of the path that we had paved for her to get there. And so yeah, it was such a cool moment. And I don't think she realized how much that meant to me with her saying that. But then we get home I actually rented an apartment in Spain for a year, and that was actually like a nightmare to do.
Why'd you do that?
Because I wanted to get that first Olympic spot. So
you can like train on the course.
Yeah. So I went back and forth from Canada to Spain, and I rented the apartment out to a bunch of other internationals for like January and February. The Swedish and USA team lived in there, and it was a pigsty when I got back. they were like going to be cheap as possible. So some of them were sleeping on the floor. Actually, it was the Irish that were there as well. And yeah, those guys were hilarious, but I made money on it. So we got to that first Olympic qualifier and I was ready. I knew the course. I was in the mountains. I do my best when I'm like in a mountainous place. And I actually like choked and I just didn't do well. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is not good. So again, I was like, okay, work harder. So I went home. I was home for like maybe a week. And then I was like, I'm going to Australia. Like this is our next Olympic qualifier. I'm getting there as quick as possible. So I left like 3 months before the Olympic qualifiers and I just went and lived there. I went and stayed with a friend who was on the circuit as well. And we did that race and I had won that race and it was a huge relief. And I came home and I knew that I had 2 weeks at home and then we were to fly to Brazil for our final Olympic qualifier. And then the pandemic happened. So I got home and I remember I was paddling with the Chinese Taipei and we were just cooling down after a session. And one of the gals was like, we have to go home right away. And I was like, why? And she's like, there's this flu thing and like they're shutting down places. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. That's in China. Okay. And then we had a group of gals over and we were talking about this. We didn't have a name for it yet. We're like, oh, there's this crazy flu in China. Like they have like prison like hospitals. Like this is crazy. And yeah. And then I actually went to New Zealand for a couple weeks after the Olympic qualifiers just to chill out and hang out with some friends there. And a buddy of mine was flying to Antarctica the same day that I was flying to back to Calgary. And he was like, oh yeah, we're going on a boat in Antarctica. Like it's going to be sweet. And I was like, yeah, sweet. Like see you later, Mike. We like high-fived. And then the pandemic happened. He actually got stuck in Antarctica for like 2 months.
No way.
It was just like, it all unfolded in such a crazy way. I mean, we all know how the world unfolded, but it was very hard to hear that the Olympics were going to be delayed. I mean, I was 29 knowing that I was going to be 30. Like, you know, there's age is real. It's a thing you can't control. It's completely out of your control. So, when
you won that event, sorry,
I won the second Olympic qualifier. So at this point, Lois and I were head. No.
Oh.
So we hadn't qualified yet. And the crazy part too was that, in our team, there was 4 categories. There's men's kayak, men's canoe, women's kayak, and women's canoe. And they had all qualified their spots because of how the racing went out. So they knew leaving that race, okay, they're going to the Olympics. And Lois and I didn't know. So it was just this huge like uncertainty. And so everything I did, I was like,
I'm getting stressed out here.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like it was the most stress I've ever had. And going through an Olympic qualifier year is probably the hardest thing you'll ever do. But doing 2 Olympic qualifier years in a row was nuts. It was insane. So I remember staying home, and actually the pandemic summer was one of the best summers I've had in a long time. And
that was when the games should have been?
That's when the games should have been.
Canada got shut down in like March.
Exactly.
The games should have been August.
They should have been in August of 2020. So instead we stayed in Canada. We trained in Canada. We went to Chilliwack when it was cold here in Calgary so we can paddle on the river there all year. And then, we stayed. It was already transitioning into summer, but I mountain biked with my friends and I went creeking and did a bunch of waterfalls and trained on the rivers that I grew up paddling on and actually spent a summer in Canada. And I remembered how beautiful this place is and how lucky we are to live here. And then things started rolling, and then we were told, okay, we don't know when your Olympic qualifiers or where your Olympic qualifiers are going to be, but you need to get on an artificial course to train. And we're like, okay. So we went to Chilliwack for 3 months, stayed in Airbnbs all around. It was kind of hectic and like more restrictions. And so we just stayed in BC. And then I came home and they were like, you guys are going to Europe and we're not sure when you're going home. And I was like, okay. So I had to literally just came from Vancouver, had to fly to Vancouver to go get a visa because we were going to go for so long, French visa. Fly back. This was the day before Christmas. And I had like a week to pack my bag for anywhere from 2 to 9 months. So like 3 different seasons, maybe a bunch of different countries. So our first plan was to go to Reunion Island, which is an island right beside Madagascar. There's a whitewater course there. And so we were like, okay, we're going to go here. It's going to be awesome. And then things transcended. We ended up just going to France. And we spent 4 months in France. And it was in isolation. Like there was curfews. And I wasn't allowed to hang out with anyone other than my teammates. And I had to hang out with the person who I was competing with the Olympic spot with every single day. Like she had to be my friend. Not that she's not my friend, but when you were competing for something, it's too close. It was very hard. So we were in Pau, France, which is where the Tour de France goes through. It's a beautiful area in the Pyrenees Mountains. And we were there for most of the time. And then we went to Paris. And we were training on the 2024 Olympic course because they already built it. So we were there for a while. And at this point, we hadn't gotten vaccinated yet. So we were working with the Olympic Committee and they weren't helping us get vaccines. So randomly, we found some ways to get vaccines. So my first dose of the vaccine was in Prague. And my second dose of the vaccine was in Paris the day before I flew to Tokyo. And it was a terrible flight.
Gross.
When we were in Paris, we were told, okay, we figured out that you guys are going to have Olympic qualifiers. It's going to be in Krakow, Poland. It's in 3 weeks. Pack your bags, go. So we drove to Krakow, Poland. I'd only paddled on this course once before, but I liked it. It was a good course. And
in the mountains?
It wasn't in the mountains. But it was a cool city. Actually, really great mountain bike scene there.
Cool.
And I was so homesick. At this point, I remember calling home and my brother actually sent me a care package and it never got there. DHL lost it and they made us pay for them losing it. Oh, it was a nightmare. Don't use DHL. Sorry, DHL. I was so homesick and I remember I kept on calling my brother every day and being like, I don't even want to qualify for the Olympics anymore. I just want to go home. Like I honestly don't want to qualify. I was sick of like restrictions and I was alone all the time and I was tired and we'd been away for 6 months at this point and 6 months of like not like just so restricted, right? And my chiro, who was on my IST team, she gave me a book and inscripted in it, she'd said, do everything you can to get to that start line and be free. And I think that because I was so homesick and I was so detached from the Olympics at this point, and I was like, all I want to do is go home and mountain bike and kayak and be with my family and friends and our dog. And I think that actually allowed me to be free. And so when I got to the start line of the Olympic qualifier day, I smiled, I felt chill, like I really wanted to Olympics, but I also didn't care if I didn't make it. And then I just paddled the hardest I've ever paddled before. And I got to the bottom and I had a really good run, but I'd made 1 or 2 mistakes. And I remember like Lois getting to the bottom and she was paddling. She had a better bottom than I did. And she had gone just after me. And I looked at her and I was like, you got it. Like, you definitely got it. She's like, really? I was like, yeah, like whatever, like congrats girl. And I got out and some of the junior guys had flown into Europe and were with us. And they were like doing this and they were going back and forth. And they were like, holy cow, like, I don't know what's going on. And I was like, Trevor, what's going on? And he was like, holy shit, Haley, you just made the Olympic spot. And I was like, no. And he's like, yeah, you just did it. Like you did it. Like, and he's like my training partner from Calgary. And I was like, okay, like, like, what do I do? What do I do? Like, this is like, it's like this thing I've been working towards for my entire life. So I ran up and got my phone and I called my mom and I called my brother and I called my dad. Yeah. I was just like, I was bawling and it was so hard because Lois was standing right there too. And I said, I couldn't contain my excitement. Like I just kind of tried to ignore it, to be honest. But I called my dad and I was like, Dad, we did it. Mom, we did it. Like my brother, like, go to the Olympics. Like, holy fuck. Sorry for the story. But yeah, like, and crazy. I got my teammate Trevor to record this video, like, just because I was like, okay, can you just like, I gotta like do something. And I just like, I was this little like mouse, like, I'm going to the Olympics, I'm going to Tokyo. I was so excited. And that night I posted on Instagram and I had like thousands and thousands of messages. Like I've never, and I didn't sleep. I was so stoked. I like responded to every person and I was like, thank you. Like I was so happy. And then totally burnt out after that because it was just a huge high. Like that was my moment. Like that was my Olympics. Don't get me wrong. The Olympics were amazing, but that qualification was so much harder than the actual Olympics. And yeah, I was just like, I kept on being like, this isn't real. Like,
how close was it?
I actually won by 7 seconds, but normally we were head.
Crazy.
Like we were like within milliseconds of each other.
Crazy.
So I just had a very good
You
run.
had a race.
Yeah, I hauled ass. So then right after we went to the World Cups, I actually got a finger infection, so I paddled terrible in the World Cup in Czech Republic and then Leipzig, Germany. And then I went a mini vacation with one of my gal pals, and then we flew to Tokyo. And I was really lucky because my dad, which is a whole other sidebar thing that we can get into as well, but I have to acknowledge it so that you understand when I use proper pronouns. So my dad is transgender, and she came out as transgender because of the pandemic. So it gave her an opportunity to live her authentic self at home, and then she felt comfortable coming out. And it was in September of 2021, I said to my dad, I was like, Dad, like, I think we should scream off the rooftops together that you're a proud transgender woman and we support you. And she was like, hey, I need to think about that because that's a really big deal. And like her parents didn't know at the like my Nana and her sisters and brothers. And so I was like, well, think about it because I have a photo shoot for Calgary Pride coming up with the Canadian Sports Institute and the Canadian Olympic Committee. And I think it would be perfect if you and I came out together then. So she said yes. And we went and did a photo shoot and it was awesome. And
amazing.
My dad is actually a judge for my sport. So she went to the Rio Olympics as a judge. And then she also went to Tokyo as a judge.
No way.
So we came out and we did not expect, we expected a positive. It was amazing. There was so much support. It was hard for my mom. And my parents are going through divorce now. And it is a tricky time. And there's no manual for someone transitioning whatsoever. But through all of the media and the attention that we got with this, we found out that my dad was actually the first transgender judge to ever be at the games. So when I qualified the Olympic spot, I remember calling my dad and being like, Dad, we're making history together. And like, it was such an amazing moment to share because she was the first ever transgender judge to be at the Olympics. And I was the first wave of female canoeists to ever paddle at the games. Crazy. And we just lived our authentic selves. We were genuine to our purpose. And that's what got us there. And so,
wild.
Yeah.
Like all that, like
so many layers. So, and we just kept showing up, right? So that's like the key. So anyways, the Olympics happened. It was cool. It was not the games we thought it was going to be. We had to spit in a tube every single morning and we weren't allowed to really interact with other people. We had to fly out within 48 hours of our last competition. But it was still cool. Like the food hall was the coolest thing ever. Like I remember like walking in there every day and seeing like the cool, like Tony Hawk and like Djokovic and like Naomi Osaka and like Serena Williams. And,
what do you do?
Yao Ming. I sat beside Yao Ming and I had no idea who he was, but I knew this dude was huge.
It's like 7'1", right?
Yeah, I was like my feet, my legs are below the table and his were like up here above the table. And I was like, who is that guy? Like, that's insane. And one of my friends was like, yeah, that's Yao Ming. I was like, oh, I know who that is.
I know the name.
And he'd been retired, so he was a little, like he'd let go a little bit.
Yeah,
but
a little loose.
Yeah, like it was so cool. But I was like fangirling so hard and I wanted to like go take pictures. But then I was like, the Olympic Village is just a place where athletes eat and sleep and recover. And it's like, I'm here doing the same thing that they are. And so like, they're just a person. And I was actually at that point was quite overwhelmed with all the media attention and requests and just.
It's that intense.
It was. I had to actually get a media attaché, a personal media attaché, and start, because I was getting requests like 3 or 4 a day for like 4 months.
No way.
It was next level, and you're not getting paid for those requests too, right? So it's like time that I'm choosing to donate, and so energy, absolutely, and it's time away from training, and so I fangirled silently because they're just doing the same thing. Which
is hard to put your head in that mindset. Like these are just regular people that they do the exact same things you do, just different sports. Yeah. Are you training for the next Olympics? Is that a thing?
Yeah. So I don't know. I definitely, I know that I love paddling, and I know that I could very well do it, and I'm still training, and I'm still loving every minute of it. Cool. But
to be determined.
Yeah, I think it's. I still feel like I really love being home right now, and that's really important to me. And to be serious about Paris, I need to be on the road, like all the time. And so, I still very much so would like to go to the Olympics, and Paris would be so cool. So it's. Currently, I am working towards that, but I don't know. It's hard to say. Rich. It's not the same. It's not the same relationship I've had with Tokyo.
It's changed. Yeah. I just want to be cognizant of your time. I know you're super busy, so this was unbelievable.
Yeah, thank you.
This was like super cool, just to, both sides, the athletic side and that like marketing side. Your brain was like dialed.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is really cool. So to put a bow on the show, I only ask one question, and yours is, you're born here, so it's, when I say Calgary, where does your head go?
Stampede.
Stampede. Oh, there's going to be a good friend that appreciates that.
Stampede or the mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super cool. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It was really cool to meet you and just hear everything that you have going on, so thanks for taking the time.
No worries.
Thanks.
Thank you.